Well, often when homeowners are thinking of renovating to create more space, they look at an extension or perhaps building up by adding another story on top. But there is another way, raising a home and then building in underneath. It's common in Queensland where there are, surprise, surprise, beautiful character homes, Queenslanders, that lend themselves to this type of renovation. To find out more, we are joined by an award-winning architect who really specialises in these kinds of renovations, Dion Seminara, principal at Dion Seminara Architecture. Dion, thank you so much for joining us. Just firstly, can I ask you, I mean, what houses are suitable to be lifted and then built under? Does it obviously need to be a timber-framed home?
Yes, yes, definitely a timber-framed home. Certainly would have a few issues raising a brick house. So definitely timber construction is the name of the game, but it doesn't have to be what we call a pre-1946 home or a character home, a Queenslander. There are other homes that could equally be raised.
So, considering that, Dion, hello, it's Prue this time. Could we do that then with a house in Sydney if it was a timber-framed home?
Definitely. The only issue is probably you won't have the trades to actually do the work. There's obviously in Queensland they get a lot of work.
Yeah.
But down south, I was recently doing a job in Longyearbyen. I think I've pronounced that correctly.
Yeah,
Longyearbyen. And it was one of the only Queenslanders. It was heritage listed Queenslander in Sydney. So it actually had been raised. It probably wasn't quite raised quite rightly, but it was raised and. But yeah, definitely over the border. We do a lot of work in northern New South Wales, so certainly house raising companies will go that far. Whether they would go to Melbourne, that would be a different thing.
Dion, we wanted to look through some of the projects that you've done. We're just going to look at the Hawthorn 1 property first, which is sort of that classic Queenslander with the stairs running up the outside and that sort of open area underneath. Just tell us a little bit about what you did with this property.
Yeah, that was done back in 2000. In that particular case, it was on a big 1,035 square metre block.
Wow.
So quite valuable there now. It was moved on to essentially 400 square metre portion of that block. So it was moved forward and slid sideways and raised.
Wow.
So you can do it all. And then it was built in underneath. It was extended out the side, created an indoor-outdoor space to one spot for the main living area. It was sort of a contemporary twist on the Queenslander style, and certainly every inch of that property was used. There was actually 3 townhouses created behind the house on a separate title.
Wow,
that's really interesting. Every time we've talked about it on the show, we've only ever talked about lifting and going underneath, not about moving the house sideways or backwards to take advantage of the land. That's really smart.
Yes, it certainly maximise the opportunities there, and that's done pretty well every day of the week in Queensland.
So looking then at Hawthorn 2 is the next project we're going to look at. Just tell us a little bit about the client's brief here and what you came up with.
Yes, that one it was essentially a little bit different to the last one, on a bigger block as well. That one was raised and partially dug in underneath the home. It is on a busier road to the front, but the back, surprisingly enough, when you're in the home, it's quite silent out the back. So it was raised and partially dug out underneath. They also had a pool on the property, so a little bit restricted. So we added a back deck and we actually built in under the back deck as well. So we certainly worked that site hard. We got a really nice, really graceful character home out the back. Out the front, sorry, and a little bit of interest out the back with a new deck roof and a full build-in. So it ended up 5-bedroom home, I believe.
Well,
sorry, I mean, obviously it's like saying asking how long is a piece of string, but how long does it take, well, assuming you've got all your council things sorted out, to lift a house and dig under and put it back down again?
Just that lifting component, ignoring all the other things prior to starting building.
Yeah.
So just that process, 4 weeks, the house can be raised, but the building underneath might take 5 months to do that work. So literally a homeowner can really just move out for maybe a couple of months while they get the house up, put it on the posts, stabilise it, get some stairs built back, and then they can move back.
Amazing, isn't it?
Amazing.
It's incredible. So just looking, I guess, at the Indooroopilly project next, and while we look at the pictures of this one, what it was before, and then what you've done to it, we just wanted to ask what, I guess, is the theory behind it? Why would you go with this option over, say, extending or building another story on top?
So this one is actually a 1960s home, so it's certainly not your typical character home, and many people will wonder why it was kept anyway.
Yeah.
So that house was a sort of a rectangular box in which we just picked up and built a complete house underneath. It was for an older couple, so they were in this prime area of Indooroopilly, which is close to a school, St Peter's school, which is really a lot of people want to go into this school and they want to live in the sort of close by. And so it was designed for the older couple who their kids had left home long ago, and they actually quadrupled the size of their house in reality, but it was all geared up for the future with their house to be suited to people who are sending kids to that high school.
Oh, yeah. Dream
private
family
high school.
home, isn't it?
So much for downsizing. Let's just quadruple the whole place.
And then sell it
And
to
then
a family desperate to get into the catchment.
Wow.
That certainly happens a lot. I have a lot of clients in their retirement years. Obviously, they're using their savings to build their dream home who actually double, triple, quadruple the size of the house. I mean, if they're doing it in the right space, I suppose it's good investment, capital gains tax free. So
Yeah, and then rent it to your children for a ridiculously inflated amount. I think that's a great idea.
We've got one last project we just wanted to look through with you, and that's the Southport project on the Gold Coast there.
Yes.
Yeah, tell us what you were doing here.
Yeah, that was a 1930s Queenslander, so a typical Queenslander. There, the client really wanted to create more space. Had a couple of kids. They were on a busy road, so they wanted to get away from the road. Orientation is really important in our climate here in Queensland to get the breeze and light through. So we were putting a big pavilion extension out the back of this existing house. Here we actually didn't raise this particular home. We left it where it was and built a pavilion addition out the back, primarily we did raise it a little bit, but we didn't raise it a lot because the focus was on creating the back pavilion out the back that had the better aspect and connected well with the land and was away from the busy road. So that was the primary reason for what we did there. And it is sometimes a little bit cheaper to build new. With a lot of my projects, though, renovation, new build is the same cost because they're usually sort of mid to upmarket, not low to mid standard. So it's a bit of a fallacy to say new build is cheaper. That's not the case.
Again, it's that piece of string question, isn't it, Dion? I mean, so how much does it cost to do one of these?
That's right.
Yeah, it could be anything.
Yeah.
Looking often these Queenslanders have heritage restrictions, and is that obviously the idea that you can preserve that? I mean, do you have to be careful? Say there's a set of external stairs out the front?
Yep, definitely. Pre-1946 homes in Brisbane are generally all protected. They have to be, if they're in what we call a traditional building character zone, so you do have to be careful what you do to the house out the front of the house. Council's not so much concerned about the inside. They're concerned about sort of 3/4 of the home, so the sides, the front and the sides, up to the back end of the highest part of the roof. So the first floor they're concerned. Downstairs, if it's raised, they're not concerned. So to raise a house doesn't need what we call a development approval. Down south, just about everything needs a development approval. Here in Brisbane and Queensland, generally, not everything needs a development approval, so it's actually easier to get your approval.
My gosh, you've got me stunned there, Dion. I've never. Yeah. That's fantastic. I'm moving to Queensland, so you don't need a building approval for whole suburbs or every house?
You need building approval. You need building approval, but don't need the town planning development approval. So down south, they're pretty strict.
Oh, yeah.
In Queensland, they are strict, but a lot of things are excluded. So you can do a lot of things to a Queenslander that without needing a high level approval. Building approval is very easy to obtain. Development approval is another thing. And many of the homes that we do don't actually need development approval. So that's different to anything in New South Wales needs development approval.
Just lastly, I guess the beauty of the Queenslander, and as an architect, I mean, of course, I'm preaching to the converted, is that those Queenslanders, they were built to allow the breeze to flow under and
snakes away.
Yeah, protect from termites and all the rest of it. So what happens then? With when you're raising and building under then?
Look, that is one of the things that you need to consider. Look, most Queenslanders weren't designed for the winter, so when we do renovate, they certainly improve for the winter climate. But if people don't really consider design properly, don't get an architect in to help them with the design, then they can really, really impact the quality of life in these Queenslander homes, because most of them are the project home of yesteryear, most of them are the mass house of yesteryear, but of course they're now quaint sort of homes, so I'm not sure whether the current homes of today will ever be considered quaint, but we'll see in 100 years' time. But those ones that are the Queenslanders that are left, they were standard houses of yesterday, so there wasn't a lot of respect for how they were sitting on the block, where northeast is where you should be orientating towards to get the nice cooling summer breeze through. And so in our design process, it's all about how do we make sure that it's light and airy, how it maintains that breeze, the good qualities of the Queenslanders are maintained. There are unfortunately so many houses so poorly renovated that so many of them don't respond well to climate anymore. So you don't want to live in a home that's dark and depressing, and a lot of people who raise homes don't respect our climate here in Queensland. Yes, you can have air conditioning, but you don't want to have that on 24/7, and the cost of power these days is such that you certainly won't be able to afford to do that much longer. Getting a good design, getting it to respond to the climate, respond to the site opportunities. If there's a view outlook, you want to get that from your living areas. There are so many things that need to be considered, and that's where we come in to being. We have advice services and other things to help people over the line as part of the process. It's understanding people's lifestyle that will make for a perfect home for them, and that's what it's all about. Designing for client needs, designing for their budget.
Fascinating.
That's great, Dion.
Thank
really
you
interesting.
so much, and just some beautiful projects as well. Thank you so much for chatting to us today.
Thanks very much.